Welcome everybody. I just want to quickly recap what we talked about last time. And what we talked about, and I did bring my clicker, doggone it. So we mentioned that there was such a thing called an electron. That's where everything starts, and it creates an electric field. And then moving charges create a current. That's how charges move through a wire, has a current in the wire. And current does not require a closed path in order to work, like we used to think in elementary school, right? And that's how antennas work, because it does not need a completely closed path for that current to go and stop and come back. Current, when it does run, emits a magnetic field, and then charging currents emits a changing currents emit a changing magnetic field. So when the current, moves and then grows and shrinks in intensity, then it creates a changing magnetic field. Does the same. And then a changing magnetic field creates a changing electric field as well. Together, then these two changing magnetic fields, changing electric fields create what we call electromagnetic radiation. And this is where radio waves are. This is where everything starts. And this is the very basics of the physics that we covered. And then we talked about more things that were kind of irrelevant but kind of fun. So that's where we are now. All right. Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here. It looks like the same crowd except for a couple people. Sorry you guys couldn't make it, whoever is online listening. Apologize. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. I hope you had a good one. Ours was really fabulous. All 20 of our people came to my place and descended on us, and we had just amazing food. It was a lot of fun. And yes, that's all the family I have, so we're good. All right. I just want to kick off today by starting to talk about SWR. I really didn't know where to start because there were several things we had to cover really quickly because they're all interrelated. So I thought, you know what, let's just get this out of the way because everybody has heard of SWR. Let's explore it and take a look. So SWR means standing wave ratio, whatever the heck that means. But one thing I want to impress upon you, though, is SWR is only meaningful on one frequency. It is frequency dependent. When people come to me and say, dang, this antenna of mine here has an SWR of 1.5, I'm going, well, okay, at what frequency, 80 meters? Well, no, what, 20 meters? Well, kind of. So, SWR is one frequency only. And the standing wave ratio means that there are standing waves that are created by the voltages on the wire itself. And these voltages, kind of like a guitar string, you pluck a guitar string, bang, and if you watch it, I don't know if you ever watch a guitar string, okay, but these things, they have little waves going back and forth. It's hard to see, but if you look down them, you can see places where they stop, and they continue, and they stop, and they grow. And those are nodes on those wires. And so these wires of ours, electrical wires, have a similar kind of thing because of the reflection back from the antenna. And those nodes cause this thing to have standing waves. That's what you're looking at, is standing waves on the guitar. Same thing with electricity and with antennas. So these standing waves, and what's going on is when you measure the voltage of the wave going out to the antenna versus the wave coming back reflected from the antenna, that ratio is a standing, excuse me, is that standing wave ratio, the ratio between the voltages. If you did the math and kind of sat down and figured out all the things, everything being equal, what they really are is equivalent to the ratio between the impedances, the impedance mismatch between the antenna and then the feed line. This comes about because of reflections, and so these two mismatched impedance, the impedance we're used to using on our feed line is 50 ohms, and we like to use that quite a bit because it matches our transceiver. Some people have a problem using 75 ohms because it's TV and so forth. Don't be afraid to use 75 ohm coax. It's okay to use. It's not ideal, but it's not bad. It might add to the SWR already in existence, but that's another discussion. I've used 75 ohm cable, not a problem. But at any rate, this ratio that we're talking about here is equivalent then to a ratio of your impedance of your antenna versus the impedance on the feed line. And that's where SWR is measurable, and that's what we kind of look at. So when I say impedance, I'm talking about the opposition to AC current by the antenna. So if it's under 1.7, if you measure SWR at a frequency for your antenna and it's under 1.7, I call that just about perfect, okay? I mean, I know people are obsessed with getting down to a 1.0 to 1 SWR, but number one, you don't need that. It's not necessary. I don't even know if it's possible, okay? In fact, it might actually kill you. Well, I've known people that got hurt really badly by getting a really low SWR, because what they'll do is, well, what they'll do is they'll climb up on their antenna and their towers and things. You know, how is it now? 1.1? Got to get down. How is it now? 1 point, and they'll get higher and higher. Excuse me. It's a touching subject. But on their antenna until they finally kill themselves out of getting this SWR down so low. It's not necessary to get your SWR that low. You know, if you're going to kill yourself, no. So SWR, if it's under 1.7, to me, that's wonderful. You can't get much better than that, Mark.
A lot of your handhelds run at the 1.8 to 1.5.
Absolutely, they do.
They just don't get any better.
Yeah, Mark says that a lot of handheld antennas, you know, run at, you know,
HT,
yeah, better than 1.5 SWR, and you know, at a particular frequency. No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And we're going to look at that very answer. Yes, and if it's under 2.0, it's good enough. Okay, if I'm measuring, you know, I'm trying to get on my mobile radio, and I've got an antenna, a mobile antenna that I'm looking at, and it's showing me an SWR when I'm on the 7.6 repeater, and it's at, you know, 1.95. Guess what? It's okay. It's good enough. There's no need to do a whole lot more. You know, should I be worried about that? No. Could I be better? Maybe. But you know what? It's going to work. It's just not a big deal. Okay, I'm going to say something religious. Just it's a warning. Okay. Well, depends on your religion. And that is that, you know, once upon a time, about 60 years ago or so, people didn't worry about SWR. They didn't have SWR meters. They didn't care about SWR. Why do you think that's true?
So it's using ladder
I mean, the laws of physics have changed, right? So that now we have different laws. Is that why? That's exactly right. Say that again, Mark.
They use ladder lines.
That's right, because today we use coax, and coax has changed everything, okay? Because now that you have a loss in your feed line, then SWR comes into play. Back in the old days when you had open wire and window line and ladder line, they had almost no loss. And so therefore, who cared about your SWR? When it was, you know, 8 to 1, who cares? You just ran it anyway, because they knew that regardless of the loss, all your signal went eventually out the antenna. It might get reflected back, but it's just going to get re-reflected back out the antenna, back and forth until all your signal is gone. So 100% of your signal went out your antenna. And it was not a big deal. Who cared about SWR? Now, because of the loss in your feed line, it's like, well, gosh, half my signal now is going to go and warm up the squirrels and the mice and so forth. So there is a concern there. So there you go. And there's more to it than that. Anyway, but yeah, it's because of coax that we now are concerned about SWR. So, by the way, for VHF radios and such, it's really not necessary to purchase an SWR meter. People ask me that all the time. I just got a new setup. You know, do I need to, which SWR meter should I purchase for my 2-meter radio? I'm going, you know what, just forget it. They're going, but, you know. Anyway, the religion I was mentioning, though, is a religion of you got to pay attention to SWR religion. That's the church that many people belong to. And I'm sorry, I oppose that religion. You know, it's just, you know, I just don't, it's not that big of a deal. If you want to spend a lot of time worrying about SWR, fine. I can help you. Others can help you just as well, but it's just not that big a deal. What do you think, Brent?
What is it physically about the coax that generates more loss? And when you use it, yeah.
Well, number one, the geometric characteristics, okay, what you've got is a center conductor and then the shield, but you got a dielectric, and so that what you've got there for is heavy capacitance, all right? And that capacitance results in that loss, all right? That's a way inaccurate statement, sorry, but that's going to be what I'm going to give you for now. So last week you might have remembered I drew up a little equation for coax and how that works and so forth, okay? And that equation is where the loss comes from. As frequency increases, you get more and more loss. So I'm not going to draw that again. It almost broke my arm to write that equation, so not this time. Anyway, great question.
Didn't the old ladder lines or the feed lines that they used, or twin lead, whatever, often could be part of the antenna, or it would radiate?
Depending on the antenna, yes, and they still could do that,
Right.
like G5RVs are.
G5RVs.
Yep.
So, yeah, I can see. So what's the difference between when you said the coax is unbalanced and your twin leads or whatever are balanced?
It's capacitance. That's one of the largest factors that makes the difference in loss. That's why he has a question about loss.
Right.
Okay, we're talking about ohmic loss. Okay,
Right.
so that's
Because twin lead would have less ohmic loss than coax?
yes,
Okay.
yes. Go ahead.
So in something like a mobile operation, coax probably makes a lot of sense. But what about in a stable ham shack? Like, why did we get away from ladder line?
A couple reasons, you bet. And couple is the word because it does a lot of coupling. When you use ladder line, what happens is that it's a real pain. I don't know if you ever use ladder line, but man, you got to take really good care not to get it near to anything metal. And guess what? Our houses are made of so much metal, like our gutters, our stucco. That's all metal, you know. My shed, aluminum siding, everything it comes near is metal.
There's all that coupling.
That's right, because of the coupling between that. Coax has no coupling. It's like no worries at all.
Right. So in the old days, if you're operating next to the window in your barn, and the ladder line was going right out the window,
Yeah.
it wasn't a big deal.
Exactly. And in fact, what it would do is you'd run straight out from your house too. If you run up, you even ran the risk of getting near gutter, you know, or ducting. And so, yeah, it looked horrible, but worked well. Very low loss. There's another hand. Okay. Let me just talk really quickly about SWR bandwidth. This is something that's important to us because as we're talking about SWR, this is why I'm concerned about SWR, is only because it measures the bandwidth. When we talk about the bandwidth of any filter, for instance, the filtering bandwidth, if I was to look at, oops, I'm always using the wrong pen. The characteristics of a filter, here's like this is like a bandpass filter, okay, and it allows, you know, anything in this region here to pass through. Anything outside of it, it's kind of rejecting that signal. This is frequency and this is power, but what I'm measuring on this bandwidth, okay, is like this top line right here is the maximum power that's allowed. And so what I do is I say that as an engineer, hi Jeremy, I say that this is 0 dB. I make that line my because that's the maximum power I'm putting out. And compared to the maximum power, of course, that's going to be 0 dB because that's going to be the same. It's unity power. But what I do then is I measure how much half of my power is going to be allowed through this filter. And so that's usually right about here in this area. And so this mark right here is what I call my 3 dB mark down from that point. And that indicates how much half of my power, because 3 dB is half power, okay? Right? And so once half of my power is gone, that's kind of where I start measuring my filter. That means that my bandwidth is measured from this point right here, just like this, and my low and high frequencies identify this, and this distance right here then becomes my bandwidth. And that's how you measure bandwidth in a filter. And SWR is the same kind of thing because what we're measuring with SWR is half power bandwidth in the same kind of way. And that's where the 2 comes in. So, but anyway, I'll wave my hand at that and just kind of go on. But Unless like you really want to know, then I could show you the equation. But at any rate, so that's where the 2 comes from. We say that that is our half power bandwidth for SWR. That's an equivalent of how we use that. Okay, I'm getting a lot of incredulous looks. I'm going to see if this actually works. Oh, there you go. Look at that. It works. It's working. So, so if I say half power, okay, that's half power according to my Z0, which is my feed line, characteristic impedance, all right? That's equivalent to 1/2 V squared over Z0, which is equal then, compared with, with the full power of what's actually I'm measuring here. This is my antenna, and this is going to be the feed line compared with, you know, how those compare with each other. So if I do the math here, I'm just canceling those out, and I just end up with 2Z0 equals Z, my impedance there. So that means that Z over Z0, then my impedance compared with the characteristic impedance equals 2. And so this, as you remember, the ratio of impedances is SWR, right? And that's where this comes from. So the SWR half power comes from that 2, and that's where SWR2 comes from. That's why we do that. So there you go. Now you get rid of those incredulous looks. So, all right, so back to this then. If I was to measure the bandwidth by an analyzer, and this is kind of like an analyzer screen, okay, showing my SWR bandwidth across, it would show, you know, how the SWR looks across the entire, in this case, the 40-meter band. And I'm looking at this going, well, that's not a perfect, you know, screen here, because I want my SWR to be really nice across the entire band. Well, you know, if I really care. Okay, so if I want to be a purist, I want to keep it down, I guess I got to do something on the higher end of my 40-meter band. But in this case, what is the bandwidth of my antenna? That's the question I want answered by this graph. You have 5 seconds.
150 kilohertz, 175.
Wow. Okay. So again, it's going to be this place where the 2.0 is going to. Here's a 2.0 to 1 SWR. Okay, this little dotted line across the screen. It's going to be where this graph then meets that line. That means it's going to be from here to about over here. And this is about what? 7220 maybe? So this is going to be 7220 minus 7,000. So it's about how many?
220.
I would say you're right. So yeah, you're a good guesser. So yeah, it's about 220 kilohertz. That's what I would say. The antenna has a bandwidth of 220 kilohertz. And that's how you identify the bandwidth of an antenna, is by that very thing, once you get the analyzer out and take a look at it. So anyway, enough of that. So you want to if you want to change the, so remember last time we talked about adjusting your impedance of your antenna. You got to do 2 things. You got to adjust the real part, and you got to adjust the imaginary part. We talked about adjusting the imaginary part by using a tuner or a matching section. We identified that, and what we said was that in order to get rid of the imaginary part, we have to find the complex conjugate, and that's the job of the tuner. The tuner will do it very nicely for you. It's automatic, you know, or however you want to do it. But you can just sit down and do the calculation, do the math, and then make your own matching section, you know, pi L, a T match, whatever you want, and do that manually. So you can do it either way, but that gets rid of the imaginary section. But to do the real part requires a little more effort if you've got a huge real part of your impedance that you need to get rid of. And so that's where an RF transformer comes into play here. You can do that by using, for instance, a 4-to-1 balun. Balun means you're putting on a balanced line like a dipole on an unbalanced thing, which is your coax. or a 9-to-1, or a 49-to-1 unun. Unun in that case meaning you have an unbalanced line like an end-fed or an offset or dipole, right? Those things are unbalanced to an unbalanced line, which is again your coax. So an unun like that. That's a lot of confusing words. Which do you use?
So, well,
What-
basically.
how would you know?
It's telling you, isn't it? You're going from a balanced to an unbalanced.
Yes.
You're taking your antenna
Yes,
to your coax.
that's right.
You gotta figure out what you physically have, your configuration is, and then match it with a transformer based on your impedances that you're working with, right?
So first you got to know the impedance of your antenna, right?
Right.
Okay, and then I guess you can find that out through your analyzer, isn't that right?
You could, yeah.
Okay, that's what I would do anyway. I'm a good guesser, but usually I need to use my analyzer.
Because you know your coax is 50 ohms.
Yeah,
So,
okay, all right. And then so what I do is I start with these things and kind of go, well, which one is best for me?
depends.
There you go again. Yeah,
I'd say it so you don't have to.
okay, thanks. Yeah, you know, and it depends on what though?
The antenna, the height, the coax you're using, feed light.
It depends on, the number one thing is what?
Frequency.
Frequency, thank you very much. But the other thing it depends on, and frequency, it depends on the frequency of something else too, and that is the feed point impedance. I heard someone say impedance over here. It was you, wasn't it, Mark? See?
I was one of them.
So impedance. Yeah, the impedance at that feed point is so important. You know, do you have to know that for every antenna? Well, maybe not, but if you make antennas like me, then it becomes a little more important to you. Anyway, but there's a couple of different balun types you can get into. There are current baluns and voltage baluns. I'm not going to get into the different types in here because that's beyond the scope. Okay, understand that for most cases, I highly recommend that you do not make a voltage balun. There is a time and place that you can use a voltage balun, and it's more appropriate. I wrote an article about that, so go look for that. As to a particular type of antenna, I'll just go ahead and say it. But it is an inverted L. Inverted L's like voltage baluns, but it's a particular purpose, not here. Anyway, but a current balun is usually the best thing to use because it has less loss, it's got good characteristics, it's got a bigger bandwidth. Anyway, so. All right, so we're back to the question of how do you know? So what I want to do is find out the correct transformer ratio that I want, 9-to-1, 4-to-1. I mean, everybody has their own favorite dipole they'd like to use and so forth. A lot of people like to start with an end-fed because it's easy and you can feed it at one end of the antenna. And so to look at a long wire that's like fed for 80 meters. So I took a long wire and I want to say, well, I want to cut this wire for 80 meters at half wave. Well, how long is that? So I get into my calculation and say, oh, 468 divided by 3.6 megahertz. That's my 80 meter, about middle, that's the lower end of the phone port of the 80 meter band. Sorry, I'm in your way, Gary. Okay, well, where does a 468 come from? I just pulled that out of thin air. Well, that's actually, if you sit down and did the math, okay, that's just simply the conversion factor between megahertz and feet. That's all, nothing more than that. So if I just took megahertz, let's see, 300 divided by that, that's going to equal the number of meters, and then divide that by half wavelength, and then inches to feet, and so forth. And if you divide all that stuff out, you come up with this 468 number. That's easy to remember. What that means is half wavelength. If I wanted to do it for quarter wavelength, I'd use 234, just half of that. What do you think, Jim?
Does the 468 work for any frequency you're dealing with?
Yes, it works for any frequency. That's true. And for a half wave, yes. Thanks. There is a caveat, and so what that is I've calculated this. My half wavelength long wire at 130 feet for 3.6 megahertz. But I also have to take into account the metal that it's made out of. In this case, if I make it out of copper, well, then I got to say, well, let's take the velocity factor into account. In this case, about 0.96, and multiply that, and I get about 124.8 feet long. So if I cut it for that, that's about right for 80 meters on the lower end of it. Well, okay. There's a little problem I got though. That's going to work really well for 80 meters, but what about 10 meters? It's going to be a little bit of a problem. And I want this one wire to work with everything. Well, don't we all? Okay. I mean, my dad used to always say if it rained beer, everybody would be happy. But anyway, so I have this one wire. I want to do a lot of things with it. And a lot of us just want to have one antenna and be done with it and not have to go out and buy several different antennas, have to keep switching antennas every time we want to change bands. That drives you nuts, okay? So they resort to an end-fed, which I'm not a big end-fed fan, but I've used them many times and they do work okay. And as long as you know how to use them. So I'm going to start with this. So I've measured my long wire. I found out that at 80 meters, I've found this thing's about 5,000 ohms. And here we are again on the real part of the impedance. It's 5,000 ohms. And on way down on 10 meters, it's about 1,800 ohms. I'm going, holy mackerel, how am I going to match this to my 50 ohm feed line? Well, okay, so what I'm going to do is then make something that's going to help me be reasonable with it. And that's where my unknown is going to come in here. So I'm going, well, okay, 5,000 ohms divided by 50, that's 100. And 1,800 ohms divided by 50 is about 36. Okay, so what I'm looking for is a perfect square. Well, it just so happens that 100 and 36 are both perfect squares, which is good. However, if I use those two numbers, I do find that they end up being about a little bit too high for my taste for SWR, because it's in the long coax I have, almost all my signal is going to be just thrown right out up to the birds, and I want to preserve more of my signal by not be succumbing to the loss in the coax. So I want my SWR to be down. In fact, well, what maybe I should have just done that ahead of time. Maybe I did. I don't know. So let's see. So 100. Okay, 100 divided by 50 is going to be 2. So that's 2 to 1 SWR, right? That's not bad. But 50 divided by 36, that's going to be 1.4. So that's not too bad either. Okay, and then. Let's see. All right. So I just am more comfortable if I got that down a little bit between those extremes. And so what I found is that 49 turns out to be just about right for me, because if I use 49, then what I've got is I've got it. $5,000 divided by 49, that's going to give me about 102. I'm getting this. By the way, this is my grandson Calvin over here. He's the genius that figured out what was going on with my reflected signal and so forth. It's like, wow. Okay, so let's see. It's not going to fool me this time. All right, so let's see, 49 to 1. Then if I got 5,000 divided by 49, that's going to equal 102. Oops, 102. And let's see, and I've got what, 1,800 divided by 49. That's going to equal 30. $37. Okay, and so here I've got 102 divided by 50. That's about a 2.04 SWR. And here I've got 50 divided by 37. It's 1.35 SWR. So those two SWRs are a little more comfortable to deal with. If I was to live with, sorry, I'm over here hitting my thing again. There we go. Let's go back to the 36. If I was doing 36 to 1 ballon over here, then I've got 5,000 divided by 36. What does that give me? That's that can't be right. And then 1,800 divided by 36. Is 50. So 50 is right on the money, but here, 139 divided by 50, that's 2.8 SWR. So on the low end, the 36 to 1 is just not going to work very well for me because the SWR is going to be just a little bit too uncomfortable for me. So that's why I decided on 49 to 1. 49 to 1 makes it so that, make this antenna really nicely. So I could use anything in between 100 and 36, according to my long wire calculation. But, 49 seems to work pretty good. And that's what, the math comes out to be here.
No,
Sir, Jim, and then
the one thing I don't understand up there, where did you get the 5,000 ohms and the 1,800 ohms? Where did those come from?
So I took my analyzer and I just measured it on the wire.
So that's impedance.
That's right.
Resistance.
That's right. It's the impedance, and it turns out that there was probably some imaginary, but I'm just ignoring that because my tuner is going to take care of that. But the tuner is not going to handle this very easily. Always, it's a longer story, but that's where it comes from, is the analyzer.
You had to analyze to find that.
That's right. Yeah.
At some point, you're going to talk about how to use an analyzer?
I did last time, but I can do it again. Absolutely. I can bring it out, and yeah, you bet. It's kind of hard
I
to.
must have slept through that last week.
I heard a couple snores, so it's very possible. But no, we can do that, definitely do it again. Scott, welcome.
So 49 is a perfect square and it works out, but wouldn't 81 also be a perfect square? And wouldn't it get you closer numbers?
It might, I don't know. I just pulled it out of the hat.
When you're guesstimating, is there a reason you wouldn't want to try and get as close to the top number? Yeah.
It's just that, if you did the numbers like I just did here, then the SWR just turns out to be just a little bit high because what you want to do is satisfy everything across the entire, 80 to 10 bands, right? Okay. And that's what I'm trying to do. And 81 ohms might work pretty good. I don't know. We can try that if you want.
Okay. So it's basically because you're trying to, from 80 to 10, that you don't want to try and optimize just for 80.
Right.
I think 81 would optimize for 80, but maybe leave you.
Yeah, 81 would be wonderful for 80 meters, yeah. But yeah, for the other side, maybe it'd be okay, but maybe not so perfect. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, well, if you're trying to get a match from your 80 meter band to your 10 meter band,
yeah,
somewhere in there you've got to make a compromise. So if you have it set up for 80 to 20, and then from 17 to 10 with two different antennas switch, you could get a better match, right?
Probably, yeah. You can get a better match by having an antenna cut for that very band. You bet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead, Jim.
So you've worked this out for 80 meters and 10 meters. Does that mean that everything in between matches up pretty well?
Yeah.
17, 20?
It'll be. If you plotted that, okay, then it'll end up looking something like this. You'll have an 80 meter SWR. And it might end up going like that, maybe in a graph that might look like that. I don't know. Or if you go into the other end, maybe it'll look something like that. You know, so if you plotted all the different frequencies along the way, you know, so ish. Was there another hand, right? I saw that. Okay. Oh, yeah.
Oh, this factor .96,
Yeah.
your antenna length adjustment factor for copper. When I made my dipoles, I just used 468, but probably they were a little bit long, I guess.
Could be, yeah. Yeah, they tend to be a little long unless you factor in the velocity factor.
So that's a velocity factor?
That's right. Yeah, it depends on the material.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the .96 is for copper. If you were to use something like, you know, aluminum, then you have to go like, you know, .67, something like that. I'm making that up, but, you know, something close to it. All right, I know that some coaxes are anywhere from 6.6 to 8.0, so like that. All right, so
I got a question.
again?
Yeah.
Go, please, go ahead, Mark.
Earlier you said for the velocity factor for the 80 meter wire that was 130 feet long would work, but when you said when it gets closer to the 10 meter, because you're gonna utilize a shorter, should be a shorter piece of wire.
Sure.
It wouldn't work as well.
Why not?
Is that what you said, or I'm trying to understand what you
Loss
said?
of frequency.
So I'm not understanding your question.
Well, you said that the .96 worked well for the 130 foot.
Oh, the .96 is just for the material.
Right.
Whether it's 1 inch or 50,000 miles, it's the same.
It's the same velocity factor.
That's right. That's how slow the electrical energy travels in the wire.
Rate of reduction of the energy traveling in the wire.
Yeah, that's right. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I was going to say, in the manufacturers, you can look that up on their website. They will have the velocity factor at frequency for each of the cables that they produce.
Right, right.
You can find that.
Okay. And by the way, why do I settle on perfect squares? Because that's what I've been doing all this time is using, come in. Anyway, you know, 100, 36, 81, 49, right? Those are all perfect squares. Why? It's because of turns ratio in my transformer. And so what you find out is the square root of your impedance is your turns ratio. And that's how that comes about. So if I was to select conveniently, you know, a square for my impedance values, that's going to end up giving my turns ratio really nicely. So if I did use a 49:1 SWR, impedance ratio on my transformer, that's going to end up being a 7:1 turns ratio on my transformer. And that's what I'm looking for, is turns ratio. That's my whole object. That's why I'm doing this, to find out how many things do I wind in my transformer to make this right. Well, 7:1. Well, 7:1 is the same thing as 14:2, right? If I ran it, you know, 14 versus 2 on my primary, 14 on my secondary. Does that make sense? Circles. Okay. So let's just go back to this slide here. And this is a little RF transformer that I made. It's an unknown that I made just to make it, because I wanted to make one, and I made it for you know, an end-fed antenna, and so I wound this thing so that it would have a 49:1, and I hope it's right. Maybe I'll embarrass myself. So I wound it with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So 14 turns versus 1, 2. These two turns are wound on each other. They're bifilar. They're intertwined with each other. Okay, so there's 14 to 2 turns on this thing, of primary to secondary, and that's how I figure that this is going to be a 49:1 transformer. I know it's clear as mud, but there you go. That's the calculation. And so when you look at one of these things, you can either be fascinated and go, wow, that's a lot of stuff in there, or you can go, wait a minute, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. See? How do you know? Brent.
So if 49:1 and 7:1 is 14:2, why did you do 14:2 versus 7:1?
Because what I wanted to do is get more flux. Okay, so the more wire, the more current that I have going into the toroids, and the more current that I have in there, the more flux I have in there, and the more coupling I'm going to have between the secondary and primary. In fact, I could have gone to a 21 to 3, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's just that wire is really hard to wind in that little space. So, you know, so yeah, I could have done that. Yeah, good question. All right. I can tell there's a question on your face, Mark. Go ahead, spit it
How
out.
does that fit into the, the makeup, okay, of the antenna?
So where part does it play on the antenna?
Yeah, how does that play into the makeup, okay, as far as where and how, and so forth?
Beats me. I'm just making this up as I go. No, so what it is simply in this case, in this one case, all right, I've just taken this long wire, and on this wire, I just want to make it into an antenna. Maybe I'm just stuck somewhere and I just want to make an antenna out of a piece of stupid wire. That's all. You know, I just found this thing lying around. I'm going, can I make an antenna out of it? Sure can, as long as I make one of these things too. And so what I'll do is I'll take my little transformer here, and I'll connect that then to my radio, just like that.
So it's in the path.
That's part of your
There you go.
system.
Yep.
It's along.
So this is my coax going out to my unan right here, and on the other end of the unan is feeding into this guy here, just like that. Just
So
there you go.
Which side of that would be the 49 and which side would be the 1?
This would be the 49. This would be the 1 because you want the higher impedance and the lower impedance. All right. By the way, there's no free lunch in this thing. And we'll get into this detail in just a few seconds, but the question is, don't antennas have two conductors? I mean, there is, after all, 2 conductors in this coax going to him. One conductor goes through him. Where's the other conductor go?
It's the shield of your
So
coax.
shield your coax,
Well, that's here. What about here?
ground.
Where?
Well, depends on.
You just wave your hand magic? Is that what's going on?
What you've got there is an end-fed half wave.
That's right.
Or a random wire.
Yes.
And so, from my reading, there are certain lengths of random wires that work better if they're cut to a certain length.
That's true.
That
Yes.
radiate better than a truly random
Yes.
cut wire.
Absolutely right. So what Mark just said was you can actually cut a wire to work better on some frequencies than on others, right? Instead of just simply being random. I wrote an article, by the way, on truly random wires and how to use them. They're a little more painful, but you can do it with something like this.
Right.
So yes, it can be done. I mean, they used to do it all the time, right? They did. So anyway, we spent way too much time on this, but I know there's another question. Go ahead.
When you put this into your system and
Yes.
you use your antenna analyzer to now measure,
Yes,
what are you going to get? What you're reading?
50 ohms. That's
It's gonna be 50.
after I say my prayer. Yes, 50 ohms.
So we'll,
Because that's the whole purpose of this guy here, to bring it down. And then couple that with my tuner, which I hope may be inside my radio. With that internal tuner, it's going to take away the imaginary part. Now it's going to be 50 plus 0 ohms. You know, give or take.
Did you answer the question where the second wire goes?
I did not, and I was getting to that. Thanks for bringing that back up. Thanks for bringing me back to reality, Jim. Okay. So where is it going to go? I mean, how is this other... So the signal is going to go out here, but there's got to be a signal that's going to come back into here, right? Where is it going to come from? Magic, right? That's where we got off into our tangent here. Thanks to Mark. Yeah, okay. So
Your picture looks like a ground log.
Is that what that wind net is?
well, there is a ground lug right there, yes. And in fact, that's what he's for. And honestly and truly, if you do not connect that to anything, it will still work, but you'll end up with a problem. And that problem is called common mode current, which we're not going to talk about right this second. But that common mode current can make your listeners drive them crazy. Brrr, how's my signal? Brrr, what signal? I hear is brrr, you know. And so it sounds really bad. And you want to get rid of that buzzing sound by grounding this thing. But you don't just simply ground it. There's a way to ground, there's a way not to ground. And man, I can talk for hours on grounding, and I won't. Don't get me started. I tried that once. It didn't go well, so very well. But yeah, grounding is a very, very misconcepted, is that a word? Term. Yeah, thanks. Man, it's a religion all in itself, you know. So yeah.
Saying that the other half goes to a ground.
It should go to a ground. That's right. If it doesn't, then what happens is this antenna is still going to come back and radiate somewhere, right? And guess what? Well, the other half of that is going to come back onto your coax, and it's going to re-radiate onto your coax. It's going to use it. It's got to use some ground somehow, okay? And if it uses your coax as the ground, that's a problem.
That's not what you want.
That's not what you want, right?
You want a dedicated ground.
That's right. I wasn't going to get into this, but I'll get into this. So, if I'm going to take a piece of my coax. Way to go, Gary. So here's a blow up of my of a cross section of my coax. All right, and what you're seeing right here is simply the braid of the coax, the outer shield. Okay, and inside here then is that center conductor. There he is, just like that. Center conductor comes through the coax there, and in between the shield and the center conductor is a dielectric, and the dielectric is what provides the capacitance and blah, 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 whatever, of the coax. And so when your transmitter then places a signal on the coax, what it does is it places it on the outside of the center conductor and on the inside of the shield. And that's where it stays because of the laws of blah, 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 and blah, 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 then it does that. And all this current stays inside those two. And because of, anyway, go look at the skin effect. That's what it's all about. And that's what that is all these, all the current stays on the outside and on the inside, just like that, 100%. And all works great until you have this kind of antenna. When you have this kind of antenna and you don't ground it properly, then what happens is this signal has to come back somehow, somewhere, and not by magic. And it does it on the outside of the coax. And this is called common mode, because what you have in here is differential mode, meaning they're equal and opposite. When you got something in addition to another signal coming back, that's called common mode. That common mode can destroy your signal. It won't hurt you. Well, your wife might hurt you for, and your signal's coming through my mixer, okay, or whatever, right? I've got a friend in Provo, he turns his radio on, starts transmitting, and his wife, she's in a recliner going, brrr, it's going, whoa, what's going on? Okay, it's kind of fun. But there was a hand. Were you just scratching your head, Mark? Okay. All right, anyway, so that's common mode current. And that's why you want to ground your end-fed antenna. And the way to do that is by doing it with a proper ground in a proper way. And this is, and just simply by hooking it to your cold water pipe is not the way to do it, okay? Simply by connecting this thing to a ground rod, a safety ground rod for lightning is not the way to do it. You need a counterpoise.
So counterpoise would be better than
There we go.
ground.
Yes, sir. In this case, a counterpoise is the ground because there's different kinds of grounds, okay? There's safety ground, electrical ground, in this case, there's a counterpoise. And I'm glad you said that because that's what I'm going to get into next.
I have to ask questions, so I
Please.
apologize to all those sitting around.
You apologize for asking questions?
I do not want to, thank you. It's important that I ask questions.
Heck yeah.
I understand.
Good. That's what we're here for.
Thank you.
That's why I'm paid the medium bucks. Okay, moving on.
Noji?
Yes, sir.
Counterpoise.
Yes, sir.
Is there a length that is best? And how do you determine that?
That's a mouthful, and I will answer that.
Okay.
Yes, it depends. So you were asking about measuring the actual antenna, And this is a photo I made of my analyzer, and I took one of Pocker's J-poles and I just measured it across there and to see if it was actually, how good it was. And across the band, this is what it turned out to be. You think it's true? Is it a lie? Did I just make up that photo and get it off the internet somewhere?
No, that's true.
You think so?
You just said you did it.
I
Tell the truth or you're a liar.
I appreciate your faith, Joe. Just for that, though, I'm going to have you help me do something. Shall we actually measure one of these things? So I brought with me a Pocker's J-pole here. And as long as I don't poke someone in the eye with it. In fact, this is one that failed somebody, and he brought it to me because it failed him. So I'm going to test to see if it doesn't work. Maybe it doesn't. See, I put an X on it to make sure that I got the one that failed. And I've never tested this antenna since it was been declared failed. So I'm going to see if it's true. Maybe I'm a liar. So Joe.
Or how can you adjust it to make it not fail?
It's hard to adjust VHF antennas. It really is. Especially store-bought ones. There's not much you can tweak to do it. Some of them will have a little, set screw you can slide, but not a whole lot. This thing, it's like, I guess I get my pocket knife out and just saw this aluminum, but outside of that, not a lot.
To the end of it, pop the cap off.
Well, there are things we can do, though. And Joe is going to actually demonstrate that to us, right, Joe?
Sure.
Okay, Joe, please. Matthew, go ahead.
I have a question about the antenna.
Yes, sir.
I can't see very well. Is there a plastic piece that's separating the area where the coax goes into?
There
If
is.
that piece is missing, it will fail.
Yes.
Okay, just want to
So,
make sure that's there.
yeah, this insulator is separating the 2 meter section here, but the 77 centimeter section is bolted right to the ground, just like this long thing here.
X is tuning stuff.
It does.
You're doing such a good job, Joe.
He always is doing such a great job, doesn't he? I'll go ahead and put this guy on here. Like I said, I haven't tested this guy since I got it back, so it's under warranty, Well, I gave him another one because he was more happy with the other antenna. So I'm thinking, what's wrong with this one? Well, I know.
Trying to tune GMRS.
Well, no, it was on 2 meters. No, it was 2 meters, but I know what the problem is. I just didn't have the heart to tell him. So, it's not the antenna, but we'll find out. Maybe I'm a liar.
Joe's
Okay.
being a great counterpoise for it.
He is. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that probably caused more.
I know that. Oh, that's much better.
All right, here we go. So I'm going to turn my analyzer on here.
Send the 21 gigabyte.
There he goes to.
Remember, it's only
If
got
he does, I'll stand over here. So I set it for 2 meters. Let's see, turned it on to SWR. I'm going to set it for 2 meters. There we go. So now I'm going to hit the check mark, and it's going to show us. Sorry for you guys way 2 miles away that can't see this, but I'm going to start this thing going, and we'll see what it does.
It's down low. Oh, and there's a spike there in the middle?
No, that's the center.
It's down low.
It looks like an
This is
inverted.
pretty flat. Yeah, it's inverted.
Just a little bit, but it's still.
My foot's tingling.
You should go over the camera.
I don't know if it's because of this, or just my knock.
Don't blame me.
Make sure
Okay.
the camera sees it, okay? Because we'll
Yeah,
watch
go
it on the
show this
video
over
later.
Okay, let's do that. I'll come over here with Joe, and we'll. So it doesn't quite look that way, but we'll check this out. I'm gonna hit this check mark again and see if it makes any difference. Here we go.
Those are
And I'm breathing, yes. Okay, how'd that turn out? That's about,
That's still below 1.5, 1.4 probably.
Yeah,
Still
yeah.
below that one.
so it's doing pretty good. So was that a bad antenna?
No.
Okay, so now Joe's going to demonstrate one more thing to me. It just so happens that this analyzer, I love this thing, made in Ukraine. See, made in Ukraine. It's the best there is, I think. It's got the ability to do real-time SWR. So I'm going to put it on real-time now. Let's see, I think it's that one. Yep, sure enough. And I've got it set to 146.000. So we're looking at one frequency only. And I'm going to hit the check mark. And then Joe's going to demonstrate the SWR on that one frequency. And you tell me, Mark, What is it showing?
1.07, 06,
So
08.
not too bad, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, move it around, please, Joe.
Perfect for me.
What's it doing?
It's jumping
went
all
up.
over. 4 point.
41.
Wait.
It was 4.0.
The antenna hasn't changed, so how is it changing?
It's the relationship to the ground, to his body, to the environment around it.
You need a better mast.
I was waiting for that one.
So he's grabbing onto it. How's it changing now?
Goes up a little bit.
It's coupling to this stuff already.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it hits up to 3.2.8 to 4.1. There we go. How high can we go? So that means that the antenna, although it hasn't changed much, maybe the temperature got a little warmer, I don't know. But this thing is jumping all over the place depending on what he's doing with it, what he's touching, how low it is. What if he put it sideways, then what? Any difference?
In his movement, it jumped up, but it stabilized. When
So as he's moving around, right? So when the wind's blowing, it might do that? Okay.
Yeah, maybe.
All right, Joe, thank you very much.
Come together, I'm here to help.
You're a great antenna holder. So even though this antenna was under warranty, and I gave him his new antenna,
Tight.
And he was happy with the new one. But the new one would have done the
I'll just
same
have it.
thing.
Yeah, it's over with.
So what
There you go.
did
Thank
he
you very
change-
much.
What did he change that made him happy with the new one versus that one?
he didn't. I changed it for him when he wasn't looking. But that's okay. So anyway. True.
You won't give a name to the owner, right?
I didn't tell you his name. Bob.
Only he will know.
No, that's fine. He was actually in our class last Saturday, but no, he knew it was going to happen. I don't keep
What
many
did he
secrets.
change?
So he actually put the antenna higher, and I raised it higher. So when I helped him mount it, okay, so he had it sitting right there on his window, and I took the thing and I put it way up in the by his attic with a broomstick. So I attached it and I raised it up. And I said, "Now how is it?" He goes, "Wonderful." I'm going, "You can keep the antenna." So he was happy. I took my broomstick back. So anyway, don't tell him. So anyway, so there you go. So the actual antenna bandwidth then can be measured, but understand when people say my antenna has an SWR of whatever, you know, your first question is going to be, "Hi Sylvia," is what frequency is that applied to, right? All right, we beat this to death over and over. Let's talk quickly about antenna gain. Something that's dear to my heart. When I was 8 years old, my grandpa pulled me aside and he took a flashlight just like this and he took it apart. And I love my grandpa. He showed me everything I ever knew. He was a wonderful guy, a good Elmer. And he took his batteries out of the flashlight like this, and he took the bulb out of the flashlight too. Hope I can do it. And he's much smarter than me, but I'm going to try to do this anyway. Bulb. All right, here we go. Flashlight. Oops. Batteries. I need Jeopardy music to be playing while I'm doing this. Oh, please don't sing. I was hoping you'd find the app. You guys are just too old for this. No, man. Grief. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to hook these two batteries in series, this light bulb here, okay. And so I'm going to have Curtis help me demonstrate this. You can just stay right there, but I just want you to be an observer. So here we go, here we go. There we go. Nice and bright?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not bad, huh? And when I saw him do this, I was like, whoa. I didn't know how electricity worked. It was an 8-year-old. Okay, I was fascinated, but there you go, right? Then he did something remarkable. Watch. Nothing up my sleeves. I have no sleeves. I'm going to put the batteries back in. reinsert the bulb into the lens thingamabobber, put the deal back on. See, I didn't put anything else back in the flashlight. And then he turned the flashlight on, right in my eye. Now, does it look brighter to you?
Because of the lens.
Yeah, it looks a lot brighter, doesn't it? But wait, how did it look brighter? Did I add more power? Did I add another battery to it? So I didn't put more power into this system, did I? No. It was because of why again?
The reflector in the lens.
So the reflector, well, how does that make it look brighter?
Because it takes all the ambient light around it and pushes it forwards out the lens.
And that's exactly how antenna gain works.
It refracts, no, it reflects it.
In this case, it reflected it, yes. And this is how antenna gain works, because antenna gain means that we didn't get more energy. We didn't invent new physics, okay? We just took the energy that was, emitted from the antenna and we focused it more in one direction than another. That one direction might be kind of relative, however, because as you look at the antenna gain, so, in other words, if I have an antenna here and it's shining everything in all directions equally, which is not possible with this one wire, but still if it was doing that, then that means that some way, if I was to take all this energy and focused it then into one place, then that would be called gain. Gain means that I'm simply focusing more of it. But it comes with a caveat. So if I have a monopole like this, like at the end of my HT, for instance, its gain is not completely omnidirectional, but it will be omnidirectional around it. And so your gain is going to look like, equal.
You're saying it's going to be flat.
Kind of a flat donut, okay? Yeah. And in fact, the higher the gain, the flatter the donut. So if my HT was to be this really, has a really high gain antenna, all I'm saying then is that the donut that might be produced by some radios or some antennas might actually be flattened out to be like something like this. So that the gain is higher than on this. Now, let me just go over that for just a second because I know this is kind of confusing. So,
are we talking about reception or transmission?
Whoa, good question. What do you think, Joe?
Depends.
I think we're talking transmission here.
In this case, it doesn't depend because there's a thing called reciprocity. And I can't even spell it. So you can't erase one little tiny thing here. Anyway, reciprocity means that your antenna transmission pattern will look precisely the same as your receiving pattern. They're identical. That's proven physics, okay? So there's always going to be the same. Sometimes real experience kind of argues against that because we change things and we don't even know we changed them a lot. But anyway, that's what reciprocity is. So let's just say, well, let's go through this first, and then I'll say that. So my antenna gain is the direction of the strongest signal. Most people think of antenna gain as a number, like what's 5.0? 5.0 what? 5.0 sir? No, it's.
That's in relation to an isotopic
And it's a relation to something, right? And we can't always agree on that, what that something is. If we don't know what it is, then we always have to assume that it's in relation to that isotropic radiator. So, and so since we can't agree on it, one thing I want you to understand that when I say gain, I'm talking about direction, not a number, okay? And yet I'll define my own statement by contradicting that a couple times here and there. Still, antenna gain means direction more than a number. And by reciprocity then, the direction of the greatest sensitivity as well, that means in other words, receive as well as transmit, is also the same direction as your gain. So the value that we're talking about is compared with that of a perfect dipole, which is the assumed standard. So the standard we talk about all the time for gain is a simple dipole. In fact, I like this guy so much that we had last week that I decided to give him a name. And so this is Harvey the dipole. And he has really nice gain, but his gain is very, well, there is no gain because we compare him with a dipole and he is a dipole after all. Since he's a dipole and we compare with a dipole, he has a gain of 0 decibels, which is the same thing as when you take the log of 1, that's a 0, right? So logarithm, that's what decibels came from. The log of 1 is 0, so therefore this thing has a gain of 0 dB. Well, 0 dB what? Compared with a dipole. That's what you want to think about. Well, do we ever compare it with the ideal antenna? Well, there is no ideal antenna. This is the ideal antenna, your dipole. Harvey is ideal. That's as ideal as you can get because everything is in relation to him. We can talk about the isotropic radiator, but you can't build one. I tried. I failed like 5 times. Didn't work. So I gave up making the isotropic radiator. Everything in therefore is in relation to this guy here. Harvey sets the standard. So,
But Nochi,
yes, sir.
you will find manufacturers out there that rate them in dBi.
That's true.
And so you have to watch that.
Yes, you do.
As opposed to DVD,
Yes,
which is isotropic or dipole.
that's right.
And because they can make a slightly bigger number
That's right.
if they're relating it to dBi.
I mean, you'd want to sell more if you were an
2.15.
1.5. If you're an antenna manufacturer, you'd want to sell more too, right? I mean, to make money, right? So we measure antenna gain in dBd because that is the standard. We assume we measure it against a dipole. That's what the little d on the right means is, so decibel with respect to a dipole. That's what that means. If a label ever doesn't say it, like Mark is saying, always assume that it's dBi, the worst case. So if they're saying, our antenna, man, it's got gain of 12 dB, we're going, compared with what? If it doesn't say, you got to assume dBi. So what you got to do is subtract 2.15 from that and going, okay, your real gain is only about 10 dB, which is still pretty good. But still, that's what you got to do is subtract it first, and then you got reality coming along here. Now, let me just mention that there are effects to antenna gain, okay? And that means that, let's say you put 30 watts into your antenna, and your antenna exhibits 9 dB gain. So just as a recap, okay, 3 dB means 2 times. I don't draw 2 very well. It's been a long time since elementary school. There you go. So that means I double whatever I'm talking about. So if my sister gives me a bucket of marbles, and then I've got another bucket of marbles that my brother gave me, suddenly I've got an increase of 3 dB. Okay, so that 3 dB gain, but I don't have an antenna. Oh, that just means I doubled my number of marbles. So it doesn't matter what I'm talking about, I'm just doubling something, right? In this case, I'm doubling something else, which is the signal strength in one particular direction. So that's what 3 dB means. But this is logarithmic, which means it adds up. So if I say 6 dB, that equals 4 times. 9 dB, same thing, equals 8 times. So it doubles each time. 2, 8, 4 times. So there we go.
So each 3 dB gain doubles the...
That's right. So here, I've got, in this case here, my antenna, my radio puts out 30 watts, okay? Well, my antenna then has a 9 dBd gain of, that signal, which means my output is going to be how much?
90 watts.
180. 3 times 240. 240 watts. 240 watts.
Ding. So your ERP, this is called effective radiator power. What comes out of your radio is called PEP, peak envelope power. And that's when sometimes you'll see that that nomenclature when you look on your radio's manual or the website or whatever. You'll see such and such 100 watts PEP. You're going, what does that mean, right? Okay, PEP is just the wattage that your radio is putting out right there at the connector. And then what your antenna does with it is, beyond that. And in fact, this antenna here with 9 dBd gain, his end result is going to be ERP, effective radiated power. It's going to be 30 watts times 2 times 2 times 2, which is 240 watts. You're right.
And then just to be clear, that 240 watts means that in some other direction it's a lot less.
Exactly, yes. I love to violate the laws of physics, but I've tried, but I can't. So yeah, you're right. So here, we haven't violated anything, but instead, what happens, we're simply focusing or concentrating more of our available power in one direction than another. And that's all that means. So that's what, antenna gain means. At any rate. So this is why it's also good to get, better antenna. You get better gain, blah, 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 blah. But there is one other problem with antenna gain too. Is it ever bad to get more gain?
Well, it's noise.
What's that?
If you're hearing noise,
You can hear more noise, that's possible, yeah.
it amplifies everything, not just
Anything else? I've got a good friend who put up a 12 dBd gain antenna on the repeater. Okay, I won't say who, because he's listening. What's that? Well, he did because he wanted to really get his signal out. Okay, he did that on the repeater, and almost nobody could hear him.
Especially if you're right under it, directional.
Exactly. So, both of you are exactly right, because his gain, instead of looking like this, it was this narrow, and so as a result, it was shooting right over our heads. Okay, and so our signal, we couldn't hardly pick up that repeater at all. He swapped that thing out for a 3 or 4, I forgot what it was, dBd gain antenna, and suddenly everybody can hear just fine. And he's going, okay, lesson learned, okay? Higher gain doesn't mean better. Sometimes you got to take a lot of things into account. Oh. 30 watts, 9
If you're in a
dB.
situation where you need the 12 dBs to maybe hit a specific spot,
Sure.
then it would be valuable.
Yeah.
But
See, and what direction is always what you want to ask. You need to consider beam width, and beam width is how narrow that beam is you're sending out. And what do you think, Mark?
Yeah, so when I was doing commercial antennas for an 800 meg radio system, we had a high gain, it's a 22 foot tall, 800 megahertz, so
Yeah.
it's multi, right?
Phased.
They're phased with a down tilt.
Okay.
So it had a high gain, but we tilted it down to where the users were, on top of the Kimball Tower at BYU, for example.
Okay.
The high gain in the direction we wanted it, tilted down, worked great. So that donut was squished down and pointed down.
Yeah, and these repeater towers, unfortunately, they're slanted, and so they have to go up, and they're always facing either up or straight, and it's like they never get it right. But eventually, the guys who understand this stuff, they do. So good point. Yeah, very good. Okay, and your high gain antenna might cause your signal to go right over people's head. I am going to switch gears just a little bit, and so that I can come back around to a thought we discussed earlier. And I am going to, I guess it starts with Harvey again. My dipole. I love this thing. And where's Jackson? He was going to demonstrate this for me. Oh, I forgot. Jackson's sick today. His mother told me last night. So anyway, here's my dipole. And I love this thing, but another religious tenet I'm going to try to debunk. Are you ready? All antennas are dipoles. They might not look like it. They may not feel like, okay, almost all antennas are dipoles, okay? Yeah, there's some that are a little different, like dishes and slot antennas. Those aren't quite, rhombic antennas. Okay, there are some differences, okay? But almost all antennas act like dipoles. They have to, because they got signal in, signal out, just like we talked about last time. Here we go. And the energy is generated in one side, voltage plus, voltage minus. Anyway, dipole. That's the way it works. Well, what we're going to do now is take this dipole and we're going to dissect it just a bit. First, I'm going to take this dipole and I'm going to stick it like this, vertically. But I haven't done anything different, really, have I? It's the same antenna. It's just one part sticks up, one part sticks down.
Change the polarization.
I changed the orientation of the antenna,
Orientation.
which determines the polarization of the signal. That's right. Okay. Now I'm going to do something even crazier with this dipole. Yeah. So I'm not going to touch Harvey. Don't worry. He's safe. But future antennas might not be. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bottom section of this dipole now, and I'm going to take a really fine razor blade edge, and I'm going to split it into many different sections down here. Have I changed the antenna very much? Maybe. Some? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. And if I do that, so maybe if I draw it, it might help. I don't know. So
You're making a disc cone out of it?
exactly. So I'm going to take an antenna like that, and I've taken the bottom section, and I've just shredded it into different parts. And this is called a disc cone antenna. All right. And then I'm going to take it even farther. I'm going to now take this bottom section and just spread it out like that. There you go. And maybe just take a couple, take the rest of them and just snip them off. Is that going to work? Whenever I ask you if an antenna works, the answer is always yes, because all antennas work. About a year ago, I was playing around with my dummy load. Okay, I was just doing something on radio. And then sure enough, the net was on, and I started getting on the net and so forth. And then Chad comes back, he says, "Noji, you sound crappy. You usually sound so clear and nice and loud." I'm going, well, I don't know what's changed, you know. He's going, well, check your connection. Blah, blah, blah. So I checked my connections, went right back to it, and went, oops, still connected to the dummy load. And so I disconnected, put in my antenna, says, how's that sound? He says, whoa, you sounded much better. So does a dummy load work as an antenna?
It can.
All antennas work, okay? Some might work a little bit better than others, okay? And this one,
The dummy that's loading.
in that case, it's so true, yeah. All right, and this is called a ground plane. And fine, a lot of antennas look like ground planes, and it's just simply, this has never changed in all this that we've done. These down here have changed, okay? This is the ground part of the plane, of the antenna. And it's just simply Harvey still. Nothing's changed about him, just except him. But now we're going to change it even further. What do you think, Mark?
Well, so the center conductor should be on the vertical part. This question, that's my question.
What do you think?
I think it should be.
What if it's not? Then what?
It'll still work, but
The town's going to blow up. We're going to melt down, right?
well, but your signal may go in a different direction.
Doesn't the signal go this?
Since you're switching, what difference does it make?
Exactly. So this is AC. It's going to go in as much as it's going to go out, so it makes no difference.
Makes no difference?
No difference at all.
Convention,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, it's just,
We just do it that way.
it's my habit, okay? If Mark wants to switch it, it's his habit, and who cares, right? Because it's AC. It's all, you know, one way or the other. There is no in, there is no out. They're both in and both out. So yeah, it won't make any difference. That's actually a very good question. I'm glad you asked that. Okay, so this bottom section, let's do this. Let's put it out completely flat. Okay, that's not very flat. It's like I'm looking down on it a little bit here. There. Really, I'm trying to make it flat looking. Is that going to work?
It will work.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. That's, a lot of antennas work like this, right? In fact, an HF antenna like this, sitting on the ground with these little spiky thingies underneath the ground, work really well. And this is how AM radio station antennas are built, just like this. And these little things now are called what?
Radio.
They are radials.
And again, length matters, right?
Say again?
Length matters for your given frequency and which you work to.
Like what matters?
Length.
Oh, length matters. Ah,
How long those radials are.
that is a question that people ask me a lot. How long should my radials be, or does the length matter? Okay, and the answer is
It depends.
it depends on one thing, whether it's ground mounted or elevated. Okay, and that's actually, those are really good questions. So what I'm picturing here is an antenna that's simply sitting on the dirt. Okay, and these are spread out all along inside the dirt. All right, and by the way, another question people ask me: should they be insulated or not?
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, absolutely. I think it does, okay? As far as
I like it better if there's a little rubber on the outside.
well, the thing is, it doesn't matter for performance, so you're right about that. But it matters as far as corrosion, how long it lasts.
Right.
I like to keep it insulated for that reason, okay? But it still couples with the dirt because of capacitance through the insulator. So, yeah, anyway, so, okay. So if you want to put a ground-mounted radial, this is what it's called, in your backyard, works wonders, okay? Just don't go digging later on and forgetting where your radials are underneath the ground. And then, so the answer to that question of how long should these radials be, ideally about half or a quarter wavelength a piece, okay? And then the next question is, how many should I put down? Ideally, if you put down anywhere from 8 to 120, you're good. 120? Like, I don't have the money, let alone the time or the energy. Well, okay, so put 8. So put down as much as you're comfortable with, but the more you put down, tends to be better. These tend to work better if they're about a quarter wavelength long. If they're shorter, it's okay. It'll work just fine. If you're looking down on your yard, for instance, here's your house right over here. You got this huge tree, and here's where you want put your ground-mounted radial, and your radials can only come out like this, you know, because your house and your tree and your fence, you know. Oh well, that's okay. It's better than not doing it. Well, wait a minute. What if my antenna was over here? That's all I can do, and my radial can be only like 2 feet long, and then, you know, like this. Is that okay? Will that work?
Yes, it'll work.
Absolutely, it'll work. What do you think, Scott?
As I say, wouldn't that tend to favor one direction over the other because you have better radio?
It might. That really depends on a bunch of things, okay? We're not going to actually talk about that very much in here, okay? But there's a lot of caveats to that, but it might. Go ahead.
My antenna's mounted on the back driver's side corner of my car.
Oh, yeah.
So effectively, right, my radials are all pointing in one direction. I receive and transmit better one way than I do the other.
Yeah, we haven't even talking about that yet, but absolutely. So, in fact, we'll get to that. So, I'm going to take that same thing and stick it on my roof. And in that case, my radials are going to be like this. They're going to be up in the air. This is the bottom point. This is my feed point of my antenna. And these are my radials coming down here. And they're pointing every which way. In that case, what you want is at least 2 radials per band. That's cut for a quarter wavelength long. When it's elevated, then it matters. Okay, so that's where the depends comes in. When it's on the ground, doesn't really matter. Throw caution to the wind. Because your ground is going to decouple your radials anyway. What do you think, Jim?
Say that again, 2 radials per what?
Per band. So let's say that
At the frequency that you want to target.
Right. So on my roof, okay, I've got a Hustler 5 BTV. Okay, so my 5 bands includes 80 and 40 and 400. That's really a nice. I didn't know you can do that. That's cool. Okay. I'm learning this thing, you know. There we go. 40, 20, 15, 10. Okay, so what I do is I cut 2 of them for 80, really long wires, okay? 2 of them for 40, 2 20. So if you look at my house right now, and by the way, at 1 o'clock today, we're having an open house at my house. Don't tell my wife that I told you that. But at any rate, and you're welcome to come and take a look at my antenna if you want. Antenna's on my roof, and you can see my radials and things. But this is what I've got, and I've got, you know, a couple of these on every band.
So the two radials per band are the length that suits the band better.
That's right, 1/4 wavelength per that band. That's right. So I've got all these wires strung out there. I don't think my wife even knows I have them on radials.
Direction matter? Or does it exist?
You know, I tend to find out that the direction really does not matter. Okay, some people have told me that they have experienced some directionality, but I've never seen that. I've tried different things, different directions, but they never seem to matter for me.
The existence is more important than their directionality.
As a matter of fact, to your point, Joe, I've done this where I've had 1 vertical and I've had just 1 radial. Worked wonders. And that's on the super antenna. When you get a super antenna, That has just one radio, and it works wonders. What do you think,
Your
Mark?
buddy pole uses that same effect.
Yeah, you bet. Buddy
You
pole,
use
ham stick,
one, two radio.
Clarence, and then
If
Brent.
you have a metal roof,
What's that?
if you had a metal roof,
Okay, I'm getting to that next.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So,
I did have a
Brent,
question
yeah.
on these radios. I'm
Yeah.
just picturing this up on the roof.
yeah.
Are the radials a hard wire that is freestanding out? Or is that a wire that is attached to the roof surface?
So I use really simple 18 gauge wire that's made for all weather, and I just have it, it's connected here electrically.
Right.
On the ends, I just have them tied off on my insulator. On the other ends of the insulator, a piece of mace strand going to something on my roof.
Okay.
So yeah, they're just hanging, they're suspended in midair, kind of like thing. So poor Harvey here, we're taking him all apart. And now I'm going to take the bottom section, and instead of shredding him, now I'm going to add more metal to him, and I'm going to, okay, great, what did I do? Yeah, I know, right?
There's a box in the bottom.
Is that what that does? Let's see if that works now. Yeah, I don't know what I did.
You might have to pal it away.
Who said that? Huh?
That's your line. Your wavy line was highlighted at one time, didn't you?
Try your finger.
This one here?
Yes.
Any other ideas? I'm willing to try. How about,
Screen with your hand. Yeah. Just use your finger. Touch your hand. There you go. Now try to draw.
oh, good. Okay, you had the magic answer. So I'm going to attach a piece of metal, like my metal roof, or a pizza pie tin, you know, my wife's cookie sheet.
Some people use window screen or Faraday cloth
Sure.
for that.
Anything that's conductive.
Will it work?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. So yes, absolutely. I love this class. Okay, so yeah, so I've just attached this thing on a big, piece of sheet metal that I found at a junkyard somewhere, some humongous piece of something. All right, and this works wonders. I mean, so well. It's hard for people to believe until they put it on their roof and their wife's going, "What in the world is that?" Okay.
Waste of a good pie tin.
And that's a good point. If I want to use it on a pie tin, that works really well. If I use it for like 2 meters, okay. If I want to use it for 80 meters, that's a big. I'd go to Big Daddy's for that one. So yeah. All right.
Let's take example of the barn right behind you there.
Yeah.
Could that metal roof be used as a counterpoint?
So let's say I put my antenna, my vertical antenna on it and connected him as my radial.
Yeah.
Will it work?
Oh, it'll work.
There you
How
go.
well does it work?
It'll work so well.
Okay.
And that's why I like aluminum, what do they call them? Patio awnings? Awnings, is that what it is? When you put it on one of those things, those are like wonderful. So I've got a friend that lives in a mobile home park, and he's got like nothing. He can't put up anything. He can stick up a vertical antenna, so he's got a Diamond BB7V, which is a bunch of bands, but it's just a vertical, has no radials, okay? And he says it doesn't work for him. I'm going, baloney. So I stuck that thing right on his awning, because he has his porch sticking out over his car, right? Yeah. And suddenly he's working the world. He's going, what'd you do differently? I'm going, it's just my magic, my expertise. I'm going, it wasn't me. I didn't do a thing. I didn't know anything. What do you think?
You understood the physics.
I think I do. Okay.
So
Yeah, Alan.
you were saying
Aaron.
that it had to be a quarter wavelength. In the case of this, we're going way beyond that, right? Is it okay to have a random size for that counterpoise base plate?
There's no control over this size, right, of that barn, right? So, I mean, is it going to work? It will, but what does it change if I make it shorter or longer than the ideal? And the answer is always going to be, okay, but what does it change? let's say I was on one band, I wanted to work on 40 meters on one particular 7.2 megahertz. Who said that? Who said feed point impedance? I heard it. You're afraid to answer, I know. But
Voice in your head.
so the feed point impedance is exactly what's changing here, okay? And so if you're able to match that closely, that changes your what? XWR, that's right. And so when it does that, then you can get, closely match. If it's way off your SWR, then what can you do about that?
Transformer.
Exactly. You can put an unun or bellun depending on what what kind of a coax you have. So yeah, so you guys are just picking this up. You already know this stuff. Yeah, you can mount your antenna on a roof like that, or in my case, I put it on my car because my car has a metal roof and metal body and everything, and it works wonderfully on VHF. And it uses my car as that ground plane, as that base. Works nicely. What if I put an HF antenna in my car? Would that still work?
Yeah.
Thank you, Dakota. Yes, of course it works. It might not work quite as efficiently or effectively because it needs better feed point impedance. What do you think?
So what I'm thinking of is a mag mount antenna where it's not electrically connected, it's through a rubber whatever. Does that work as well as being actually in contact metal to metal?
So there's two parts to your question. Number one, will it work? And yes, it will work, right? And in fact, how does that work? Because of capacitive connection. You got that capacitive difference between your antenna and actually your body, right? And will it work as well? And because you got that capacitance in there, not quite as well. It's a little bit of a compromise. I mean, my wife does that very thing. She has this huge 5-inch, monster magnet on her vehicle, right? But not a single soul has ever complained about her signal. She sounds really wonderful. So, is it a compromise? You bet.
That feed point impedance is changing. Is that mostly real or mostly imaginary?
Oh, good question. And the answer is I don't know. You don't know depending on what you got. With this thing, for instance, right here, it could be all imaginary. It's just up to your imagination to how to measure it. Yep, geometry, metallic, composition and so forth, and position and such. It's like you saw with Joe here, height above the earth. Those kind of things all matter. Okay. Oh yeah. So one more thing, I guess. What if we replace this? See if this works still. We replace this. Oh, I'm just going to erase the whole thing. There we go. I replace that whole metal body or ground plane with water. Will that work? Who said no? I'm a bad teacher. Okay. It'll work so well, especially if it's made of salt water. Okay.
YouTube has the whole channel about that.
Oh, okay, good. Tell us about.
It's coastal waves and wires.
But what is it about?
He just does a lot of park activations that are around beaches and.
Oh man. Our first winter field day, our first regular field day we did as a club was at the Linden Marina, okay? I mean, ever since then, we did it as a winter field day, but that first time was a summer field day. We no longer do that because we got eaten by mosquitoes. It was really bad. I mean, my screen tent had so many mosquitoes embedded into it. It looked like, Jumanji or something, but I mean, we had to throw that thing away. So, but the water works so well. It's not even salt, okay?
Just like last year, after we got all the antennas set up, Carl got on his HF radio and he picked that guy up in South Africa.
Oh yeah, first thing,
beautiful.
Right off the bat, yeah.
Boom, first contact.
So
South Africa.
And we did so you guys know what a de-expedition is, right? Right, yeah.
Didn't guy from Buddy Pool talk about that a month ago?
Yeah, he did. Well, we are the first club in the world to do an L expedition. Okay. Yes. So, but we actually went farther. So we did. It was about, what, 6 years ago we did that? Who was with us at that time? Trevor was. But we did an L expedition, and it was on Antelope Island up on Ferry Peak. Okay. Oh my heck, did that work so well. And in fact, one of our longest contacts was 24,000 miles away. Anyways, it was a lot of fun. I'll just say that it was a blast. We had a great time. We talked to people in Europe really well. Okay, in South America, mostly in the U.S. A lot of people were, found out we were doing this. We got a vanity, or what do you call it, a special event call sign and everything. Got on the air. It was a blast because there were so many people. We'll never do that again because the people that were running the radios, they couldn't handle the pileups. So it was really hard. It's like, what a good problem to have, Man. So it was really something else. So, yeah, first club ever to do an L expedition. We've had a few copycats since then. So anyway, the water works really well, especially if it's salty water because of the ionization and so forth.
So how far away can you be from the water and still have that effect?
So Mark's asking, how far away can you be from the water? So you're talking about your radio, you, or your antenna?
The antenna.
You could be in the water.
I know, but if, like you said, you was on Antelope Island, you was elevated.
Yeah, we were. But
you were surrounded by water.
So the signal was actually hitting the water and hitting the ionosphere, right?
Okay.
So we were hitting it from two different angles, which I don't think today was the day we're going to talk about that.
So you weren't using the water as a ground plane necessarily, but just as a reflective surface?
That's right, a reflective surface more than a ground plane. That's exactly right. Yes, so that's a good point. So I'm kind of lying and cheating at the same. I'm a liar and a cheater. So Joe, you had something? Oh, I saw a hand. Oh, it must have been Ron. Okay. So recap here. Start with the dipole, turn it vertically, split the bottom to many. Those make up the counterpoise, and the counterpoise is the part of the ground part of the antenna that actually brings your signal back or sends it out. But it needs to be there, especially for things like end-fed antennas need to have that counterpoise. Pause, wait.
Are you using the counterpoise interchangeable with radio?
Yes, in this case I am, absolutely.
Is that correct?
Not always. In this case it is, because counterpoise isn't always a radio, but radio is always a counterpoise. It's a subset. Okay, so this is a very what do you call it? Standard? No.
J-pole?
Common.
Standard?
Yeah. There's another word I'm thinking of. Anyway, this is a very common cactus J-pole. Okay, copper cactus as they call it, and it's very simple in its construction. And as you can see, but most people look at this and go, "I've taken electronics in elementary school, and this is all shorted out." And it's true, DC, but not AC. And it's got a lot of different components I'm not going to talk about in any detail. But the thing is that there's a signal going in, and there it comes out right there, touches this side, and then there's a signal coming out, and it's grabbing hold of this, but this is all shorted together here, okay? Well, it turns out that this part right here is the matching section, and it's called the Q line. This is a Q line of this J-pole. But where's the counterpoise? Where's the ground in this? I mean, it looks like it's all ground, or it's all signal too. So how does this even work? If it's all shorted out like that.
Magic.
There is magic, yes. I'm a believer in magic.
Are you saying the bottom part is the counterpoise?
The bottom part actually doesn't participate in the antenna at all. Anything below the Q line is ignored.
It's like your open stub there. You have it's a similar.
Yeah, it's very, very much a very similar thing as that open stub. This is a Q line stub, and this is kind of a magical antenna. But what it is it makes it so this portion of the antenna from here to here actually cancels each other. If you look at the signal on like easy NEC, these signals here all cancel out. So this part here is actually ignored. The only part of this antenna actually transmits is from here to the end, and that's your antenna. This part down here, you can spit on it for all I care, but don't. Not while you're transmitting.
Suppose that point is roughly 2 meters.
Yeah, pretty much. And so this then becomes the ground. It's like the ground and the signal all in one thing. It's like magic. Absolutely, yeah. And it can distinguish that because this is where a node is. The standing wave ends right there. That's how this works. But wait a minute. Now we also have that very famous Pockris J-pole. This is an open stub J-pole. So it's not quite the same thing. The other one is obviously a J-pole because it's shaped like a J. I guess this one kind of has a J shape too, right? But it doesn't have that that open Q line that we had on the other antenna. So
It does. It's right there in your bracket.
So it's kind of in the bracket, huh? So yeah, you're right. It's all kind of compressed in this one place. Yeah, but it has to have its compromise by being spread apart a little bit, and that's how it compensated for that lack of Q. But it works in the same principle. Nothing down here radiates. It's all compensated? No. Canceled, thank you. Canceled by this guy over here. So the only thing it radiates is from here to the top. That's the only part that really radiates. Well, then what's this little guy down here?
440.
How does that work?
Same way.
You probably don't see the big antenna, and the node is right where the red part is of the short one on the second one.
Yeah, very much, yeah.
It's coupled to the other side.
Yeah, so this is kind of like a J-pole, a mini J-pole with this thing ignored, kind of like, sort of, huh? So it's a mini J-pole right here with this guy, and that means that nothing down here is being radiated, only from here to this part is. But wait a minute, there's a lot of questions. Like, this one's separated from the ground, this one is connected to the ground. It's like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. They do work, that's for sure. In fact, this is such a fabulous dipole. I've dedicated quite a lot of time installing these on people's houses because I'm sick and tired of hearing people's terrible signals. So I got an ulterior motive, but it works really, really well. And in fact, what you'll find out too is a copper cactus J-pole like this one has no gain. In fact, it's about a negative gain. This one has about 4 to 5 dBd of gain. This is actually gain antenna compared with and this is dual band. This is single band. So it's like, the only reason you'd want to make one of these is for experience. It's a good experience if you want to, learn how to solder copper. This guy here, just buy it from Carl and be done with it. Very nice. You got a question?
How do you get a negative gain? I want to know that.
Oh, so for instance, like a dummy load has negative gain, okay? Because it has anything that has less gain than an isotropic radiator, okay? So if it, in other words, you have very little signal going out, but a lot of power going in. So dummy load exits the power by heat, you see, instead of by radiated signal. That's right. In fact, it probably has like, a negative 40 dBd gain, a dummy load, a really good dummy load. So yeah, that's how. Good question.
Hey, Noji.
Sir.
Question over here.
Aaron.
How do we determine the directionality of that gain motor?
You know?
At a 45, at a 90? I mean, how does that work on a vertical like that, Jason?
There's 3 ways you can do it. Were you going to answer?
Well, I was going to say, it acts like, the large one could act like a reflector.
It can, yes.
Just like a periodic.
A side wave Yagi or something like that? Okay. Okay. Does that answer his question?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'd let you reflect.
Okay. So there's...
Vertical, are we looking at a 45? Because a Yagi, you're holding it, moving it around, right? How does that work with a fixed radiation pattern?
So we're going to spend about 20 minutes next time talking about patterns, okay? I don't know, maybe today, I don't know. Not 20 minutes though. There are 3 different ways you can determine the pattern of an antenna. And then that's what we're talking about here is the direction of your signal, right? Your gain. One is by simply having a little watt meter going around going, oh, is it here? Oh, it's good here. Oh, it's really, really sharp here. Oh, it's nothing down there. You could do that, okay? Another way is by simulating it. If you put these parameters like an Easy NEC, that's a computer software that you can simulate antennas, it'll tell you right off with pictures and all these diagrams and everything right off. And then third way is, well, just ask for signal reports. How is it now? Nope, how is it now? There's different ways of doing that. So you know, I don't like any of them.
Does that vary depending on frequency?
It does very, very much depending on frequency.
So you might be great on 40 meters, but it might not be the same pattern.
Absolutely garbage on something else, yeah. But will it work?
That's all that matters.
Yeah, absolutely, it'll work, guaranteed. Okay. Let's see. Spread out the counter, the monopole, pizza pie. Yeah, when we talk about monopoles, okay, there is no monopole. I mean, these radios that we have, so here's my, here's an Abri antenna. It's a monopole. It's just a single antenna I stick on my Baofeng. Works really good. It's a tape measure antenna. I've got a longer one too. It's like this long. They work pretty good, but you know they call it a monopole because it's just one thing sticking up, like an AM radio antenna. It's a monopole sticking up out of the, here's one. This is one of my favorite antennas of all. This is a Smiley. It's a 1/2 meter. Also sticking on my. This one's made for a Yaesu. Stick it on my Yaesu FT4X. Works really, really nicely. I like that because I can take it out way out in the, in the West Desert and so forth, and everybody can still hear me. Pretty nice. It's cost more than in the radio though. Still, they call it a monopole because it's just one thing. Okay, so is it a monopole really? What is a monopole?
The antenna is the counterpole, which is the radio.
So,
Or your body.
So just like we mentioned last time, yeah, the counterpoise, the other half of your antenna is in the chassis of your radio. Exactly. So there's no real monopoles.
If you're curious on that counterpoint thing for a handheld signal stuff, our good friends from south end of the valley actually have a device now you can add to your antenna for that.
So like a rat tail or
It's a rat tail.
Oh, good.
They have one that fits on your SMA connector and you stick it in there and screw it down.
I like to call it a tiger tail because a rat tail sounds too close to my last name, but go ahead. Oh, there you go. So Joe's got a rat tail on his. Very good. I mean tiger tail. All right. You can lay it on a car roof, set it in a body water. You bet. Where does an HT and his antenna fit in? Where does an HT and its antenna fit in? Oh, in other words, where in the ground plane thought process does it fit in? We already talked about that, so. All right, we talked about the J-pole, single, yeah, but there's dual band, no straight. Okay, one problem too, when you do a copper cactus J-pole, like one of those, they got a lot of stray radiation. In other words, they got radiation that's going in places you don't want it to go. Like a lot of energy is wasted going downwards, believe it or not. It's like, oh, I can hear you really good. J-pole's up there. On a Pockers J-pole, not so much. You can hardly hear anything underneath it. So it's got very little stray radiation. Anyway. Okay. We only got 5 minutes left, and this is perfect time to talk about coupling and re-radiation. That'll lead us into our next discussion next week. So when, sorry, I'm a better artist than I am talker. Okay, I guess that's how you work it, is you have to pat it and then move it. That does it. All right. Oop, wrong way. Rick, I'm going to draw you.
Okay.
All right, here you are with your radio. Okay. So there's Rick and his radio. I guess I could make this more complete by doing that, huh?
Swedish chef.
I can get really good at this. Okay, so here is Rick with his radio. Okay, and now he's got a couple problems though, and he's going, Noji, I can't figure out what's going on with my radio. Something's happening here. Well, I go over to his house. I'm sorry, I've never been to Rick's house, so I'm lying. But pretend I'm telling the truth, and I'm finding out that his radio is actually sitting right next to a sewer pipe, which if it's ABS, it's no problem, right? But this sewer pipe is galvanized iron. Or cast, right. Sorry, I'm not a plumber, so. Thank you.
Crappy signal.
And yeah. Good. Fine, water pipe then, no. So, but his proximity to this thing causes a couple different problems. Number one, his antenna is actually going to couple with this metal tube. Or even if it's ductwork, like his air conditioning system and so forth, or what other kind of piece of metal can he be near?
Stucco.
Stucco? What else? What? A stop sign?
Yeah.
Sure.
Stop sign on the wall.
Absolutely. He's got a stop sign on his wall. Okay. Aluminum gutter on his house, right? Okay. I was going to say I had to cabulate that because I've got plastic gutters on mine. So, but yes, most gutters are normal and new aluminum. And what else?
Stud wall, a metal stud wall.
Metal stud wall. Okay, it's a lot of companies have, it's metal studs, right? And you get to, in fact, that happens a lot at work. People are going, this radio is crap, it's right next to my wall. It should be, nearer to the signal, right? He moves 2 feet away. Oh, it works great now, right? Okay, what is going on? Is the thing blocking his signal? Is that what's happening?
It's absorbing and transmitting.
If some of it is being absorbed by that, and what else?
Destructive interference.
Some of it is destructive interference.
Some is radiating.
And yes, so all that is true. So what happens is this piece of metal, whatever it is we're near, and how close you are, it depends on, where's Vern? No, it was Joe. Sorry.
Frequency.
Thank you, frequency, yes. Joe kept saying that. I was hoping that Joe would say that again. Thank you, Joe and Mark. Okay, so it depends on frequency, how close you are. The higher the frequency, you can be really close and it can have this effect right away, okay? That this signal will actually not only be picked up by him, but also be obstructed by him and retransmitted by him, not only on the same frequency, but on a different frequency, okay? It's more than harmonics, okay? Okay, and this effect is intermodulation distortion, okay? And these kind of things can happen with your radio near metal. And somebody can say, dude, why are you on this frequency? Because I thought you were on this other repeater. And you're going, but I am on that repeater. And you're going, no, you're on my repeater. How is that happening? And then you move away, it's like, oh, my signal disappeared, okay? It's like, what magic just occurred? What is the source of this power? Okay, well, it's because, stay away from metal, okay? So good old Jeff, he's not watching this, I'm sure, because he doesn't watch the videos. All due respect to my good friend Jeff, he says, my antenna, he had Parker's J-pole, he says it wasn't working worth garbage. So he invited me over to his house, and he had that thing bolted right on the side of his house, his stucco house, okay? And I had to kind of explain, this is what's going on. He's going, well, but the antenna is like line of sight with the repeater. I'm going, it's line of sight with your stucco, okay? And so the stucco was picking it up, distorting his signal, and the combination was sending it out as who knows what, okay? And he wasn't getting, even though the antenna was completely line of sight with the repeater, okay? The repeater wasn't hardly picking up anything from that antenna, hardly anything. And so once we took that thing and moved it up and bolted it with the Q line on the side of the eave, okay? Then the whole antenna was above the eave. Then it worked like a charm. He goes, no, G, you're a genius. I'm going, I'm not a genius, okay? But thanks for the compliment. We just had to get away from metal. This is called coupling. And coupling has run people in so many problems, okay, because it's near metal. Get your antenna away from anything metallic. The higher the frequency, like 2 meters, 70 centimeters, the farther you got to get away from things, okay? Yeah, it can reach farther if you're on lower frequencies, but it's going to couple better if you're on higher ones. So keep it away from your metal shed. Oh gosh, we can go into so many things with that. Your antenna can couple with things around it, and when it does, number one, the one thing I want you to get out of that is that when your antenna couples with these metallic things, that it becomes part of your antenna. When it becomes part of your antenna, then guess what's gotten thrown off?
SWR.
Because of the feed point impedance. That's what determines SWR, right? So your feed point impedance gets all screwed up because it was like, but it was 1.1 SWR a minute ago. I brought it over here. Now it's like 5.5. You know, what did I do different? Well, guess what? You're right next to this soffit, okay? Anyway, we'll end there. But coupling is a lot of fun. The re-radiation part, that's even less intuitive. And that's what that little equation up there was about. Intermodulation distortion, we'll talk about that later. I'm not going to put any equations down, don't worry. But re-radiation is important when we talk about Yagi antennas because coupling and re-radiation, how do you say it? Re-radiation, that's a lot of R's for a Japanese person, are exactly how a Yagi antenna works. Mark, and then we go.
I was just going to ask, so is the coupling mostly in the near field or the far field?
That's a really good question. We actually will address near field versus far field next time, okay? But there are both effects happening in both places, okay? The answer is yes. Okay, see you guys next time. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so thanks for bringing that. Next time, we're back here at 1 o'clock, 1 p.m. a week from today.